Welcome everybody. We'll jump straight into the meeting and we'll come back and do notes and actions. Just on apologies, if we could just do quick round of introductions so everybody knows each other. And I'll take you round on the screen as you are in the order I see you. My name's Steve Einett. I'm chair of the VCSE steering group. Hannah, you're next.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I do the administration and secretarial stuff.
Jane?
Hi, yes, I'm Jane Howard. I'm not sure of the sector anymore now. I'm working just as the chair of the VCSE Health Alliance, which works directly with the ICB, but used to be part of MVA structure. So Jack's taken over from me now very competently.
Thank you, Jane. Beth?
I'm Beth Peart, Chief Executive of Action Volunteer Centre.
Thank you. Jack?
Hi, Jack Packman, Chief Exec of MVA.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, hi everyone. Tim Ulmer, Head of Strategic Partnerships at KCC.
Thank you. Lydia?
Hello, Lydia Jackson, Corporate Lead Strategy, KCC.
Thank you. Zoe?
I'm Zoe. I'm Chief Executive Pie Factory Music in Ramsgate.
Thank you. And Gary?
Hi, I'm Gary Wells. I'm the CEO of Involve Kent.
Thanks all. So we're going to dive straight into our first item. So first item is around local government reorganisation. And although on the agenda it kind of separates out Tim and Lydia, I know Tim's got a presentation for us, but then I know Lydia's got insights as well to share with us about local government reorganisation. And then we can perhaps let Tim go. Lydia might hang around for a little bit and talk specifically about VCSE stuff, but yeah, there'll be a bit of opportunity for the two of them to update us from their different perspectives. So I'll hand over to Tim first.
Thanks, Steve, and yeah, really pleased to be here. Really good to meet everyone. Yeah, Lydia and I are very much a double act today, so she might want to chip in through the slides as well. So basically, as I said, Head of Strategic Partnerships. So I lead on kind of external strategy and stakeholder engagement. So I'm employed by Kent County Council, but I work on behalf of all 14 local authorities, police, fire, health, Job Centre Plus, probation, whoever else. My job's part funded by them, so I'm relatively neutral across all of those strategic partners. And essentially, I lead on things that are kind of bigger than one organisation. So obviously LGR is a prime example of that. So I lead on the kind of external collaboration side of the LGR process at the moment. So I work to the leaders and chief executives of the councils, plus those wider partners. And I think it's fair to say the VCSE are very important to them. It has come up a number of times in conversations, particularly with the chief executives, about how and when best to engage the sector in LGR. So we'll probably come to that towards the end. So I guess I'll just go through a kind of quick overview of LGR and devolution a little bit. I'll assume relatively low knowledge unless you tell me differently. I've got some slides which I'll rattle through, but I'll send them to Steve and Hannah afterwards so that you don't need to take any notes. I'm conscious it's a dry subject as well, so I'll try and keep it as engaging as I can. I do need to share my screen, so bear with me a second. And I apologise in advance for the pink. I should say very much a collaborative process, this. Canterbury City Council lead on the comms, and the pink, I can say, is their fault. So, but it at least wakes you up, so there you go. And as I say, Lydia, feel free to chip in if you need to. So very quickly, if I can get this working, there we go. I thought I'd just start with a really basic explainer of the difference between devolution and local government reorganisation, because essentially they're often spoken about in the same breath, but they are distinctly different, albeit aligned at the moment. So devolution is very much around the transfer of powers from government to local government. So, for example, what like you might see in Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales, or in cities like Manchester, where government have literally given powers to local areas to lead on. Local government reorganisation is about how existing powers and funding that sit in local areas is perhaps reorganised or moved around into new structures. So at the moment, government are clear that they want to proceed with both devolution and local government reorganisation. So they are aligned, but distinctly different, which is important to understand. So going back to 2024, which feels like a lifetime ago, when the new government came to power, they basically set out an ambition to deliver devolution to the whole country. So essentially to level up those powers that exist in the devolved administrations and the metropolitans and give those to everywhere else, predominantly counties. We were asked to submit an expression of interest in November 2024 for Kent and Medway to be prioritised for devolution and local government reorganisation. We responded. We had a lot of very, very strong messages of support from government. However, in February 2025, rather surprisingly, we were told that we weren't going to be on the priority list. So essentially what that meant is that we would have to deliver local government reorganisation first and then determine what our devolution pathway would look like a little bit later. And that was yet to be determined at the time. So I guess the concern for us locally was that whilst we weren't put on what was called the devolution priority programme, some of our statistical and geographical neighbours were, so particularly Essex and Sussex, where we are. So I think it's fair to say leaders and chief executives were concerned that not only would we not be prioritised, but that other neighbouring areas would be, so we'd actually be effectively disadvantaged. I won't go through this, but essentially local government organisation, as you can see, is the government's long-term vision for simpler county, simpler council structures. So a bit like you have in Medway already. So a single tier of local government. Obviously, the government would say there are some long-term benefits to that. You might agree. Some leaders disagree. I think that's a matter of opinion. Clearly, there are efficiencies to be generated. There are also potentially some disadvantages around local councils being a little bit more distant from local areas where district councils won't exist anymore. Ultimately, the exciting bit is the opportunity for local government, so for public service reform. So the opportunity to rethink how we deliver all of our services with police and fire and health as well in a more person-centric way. I think it is worth saying, though, that the LGR and devolution doesn't solve the current financial constraints that we will face. It doesn't make the sector more viable. There's still a question to be determined about how we make local government more viable in the medium and long term. Again, won't go through this, but I thought just a useful slide for your records. This basically sets out the existing system, I guess. So which services are currently a county council responsibility, which services are a district council responsibility in two-tier areas, and obviously the purple represents unitaries because everything would be a unitary council, would be a unitary council responsibility post LGR. So the implications for Kent and Medway. So we were asked, because we were on the devolution priority programme, we were asked to submit business cases for what we thought LGR should look like by the 28th of November last year. So essentially, government were asking us what form the new council or councils should look like. The leaders and chief execs worked really closely together through my office as well, to ensure that we had as joined up a process as we possibly could, because it is very much the most contentious subject in local government. A lot of areas around the country have fallen out over this. They've submitted multiple business cases using different data sets, different consultants, different evidence bases, making it really hard for the government to decide what is the best for their area. For us, we've managed to keep everyone together in a single process. So we've had a single strategic business partner, single evidence base, single data sets, single program governance. And we've although we've submitted 5 business cases, which I'll come on to in a minute, all of those are derived from the same data sets, financial analysis, use a lot of the same shared narrative. Essentially giving government the opportunity to compare apples with apples, if you like, rather than apples with pears, making the process a lot more simple. And what that's meant is that we haven't had councils criticising each other's proposals, but actually rather more focused on selling the advantages of the one that they're backing. So the business cases had to be submitted by the 28th of November, and each council had to determine which was the business case that they were supporting. We had some money from government to support that process, not much, but it was about 500,000, of which we still have about 300,000 left. And that's because we worked together on the process. 2 of the business cases agreed more than 50%, received more than 50% of council support to be part funded from that amount of money from MHCLG. The remaining 3 were funded by individual councils, but they were all part of the same joint process. So the submission happened on 28th of November. All of the draft business cases are available on the Kent Leaders website, and each of them went through each council's democratic process beforehand. The invitation to submit process didn't extend to devolution, but the government were clear that each submission had to set out how the submission aligned with plans for devolution in the future. They're weighty documents, so if you fancy some bedtime reading, they're kind of 300 or 400 pages each, and there's 5 of them. So don't print them out necessarily, but well worth dipping into them, particularly some of the tables and graphs. Government is clear, LGR, as I said, should support devolution, and in February 26, so last month, they did write to Kent and Medway asking us to consider submitting an expression of interest again, this time for what they're calling a foundation strategic authority, which is essentially a light touch first step towards full devolution in the future. And leaders and chiefs are currently considering their position on that. I'll go very quickly through the geographies of the 5 business cases that have been submitted. I'm sure you've seen these on social media and everything else, but useful just to outline them really quickly. So the first one is what we're calling 1A, and that is a proposal for a single unitary council covering the entirety of Kent and Medway. So that would currently combine KCC, the 12 districts, and Medway as things stand. Underneath that, there would be 3 area assemblies, and they would be on the geographies of the different tones of blue in that map. And KCC is currently supporting that submission. 3A is the first of the 2 jointly funded models, and that is basically along the same geographies as 1A. So it proposes 3 unitaries, one for North Kent, one for West Kent, and one for East Kent on existing council boundaries. So no changes in council boundaries. And Folkestone, Maidstone, Sevenoaks, Tunbridge Morning, and Tunbridge Wells are supporting that one. The little table on the bottom left-hand corner sets out the varying populations for those 3 unitaries. So you can see they're relatively even, all above 500,000. And I guess is the footprint for a lot of existing collaboration. So that's 3A. 4B, similar kind of methodology, so still no boundary changes, but creating 4 unitaries. So this one is supported by Ashford, Canterbury, Dover, Swale and Thanet. And you can see obviously a slightly smaller North Kent, so Dartford, Gravesham and Medway. West Kent, as it was in the previous submission, a smaller East Kent made up of Canterbury, Dover and Thanet, and then a Mid Kent comprising of Swale, Ashford and Folkestone. On this one, the populations in North and West are slightly bigger than East and Mid. So that's 4B, so that was also jointly funded. 4D is the option that was funded by Medway Council. And this is also a 4 unitary model that was ultimately supported by Medway, Ashford and Canterbury. So this is slightly more complicated because you'll see that we have white lines denoting the existing council boundaries, and we have the dotted lines that are proposing the new council boundaries. So you can see, for example, Dartford and Gravesham in the northwest of the county. You've got kind of the urban bits of Dartford and Gravesham with Medway and part of Swale. The rural bits of Dartford and Gravesham are in West Kent with Sevenoaks and Tunbridge Moorling as things stand. And you can see there's a couple of other council boundaries that split as well. So Folkestone is split between east and mid. Tunbridge and Moorling is split between west and mid. And Swale, obviously, in this scenario, is split between north, mid, east. Yeah, so essentially Faversham looks toward Canterbury, for example. Sittingbourne looks towards Medway. So government are clear that boundary changes will be considered, but there needs to be a very clear rationale. And so the council supporting that business case have ensured that in their business case, that sets out the rationale for why they're proposing it. The final one, which is supported and funded by Dartford and Gravesham councils, is a 5-unitary model. So similarly, West Kent is broadly the same as most of the other submissions there. North Kent is half of Medway, Dartford, Gravesham and Swanley. You have the remainder of Medway and Swale in a mid-Kent. Faversham with Canterbury and Thanet in an East Kent, and then Ashford, Folkestone, Dover in a South Kent. And again, you can see obviously the population sizes would be smaller because there are more unitaries, albeit West is still above 500,000. So those are the 5 models. I'm finished doing my kind of weather presenting bit now. So I guess I just tried to put a bit of a slide together on what the impact on VCSE might be. And clearly a lot is unknown at the moment. So there have been other areas in recent times that have gone through LGR, but it's fair to say they are smaller areas. Kent, like Essex and Hampshire, are much larger than other areas that have been through LGR recently. So a lot of this is iterative and we need to work together to discover the impacts. But I guess, you know, off the top of my head, there's the opportunity for clearer and more consistent partnership working, because you'll be working with a single authority. So you're not working with the county and a number of districts and a unitary in Medway potentially as well. So similarly, you would imagine that with single unitaries, there will be a simplified and more consistent funding approach. I would imagine as well. And potentially improved integration between VCSE and council-led services. And certainly that's something that we've heard talking to places like Cumbria and Cornwall before. If well managed, LGR should provide a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to deliver that public service reform that I was talking about earlier, the opportunity to rethink how we deliver our services. And of course, you would probably notice that government have also set out plans to change the way the local NHS works and police forces too. So there genuinely is an opportunity to kind of redraw how services work together. Obviously, we do have hopefully a relatively good relationship as things stand, but there will be opportunities to do things differently. And I'll come on to the timetable in a second. I'll move on to this now. So this sets out the timeline for how we're anticipating things to work over the next 2 years to what we call vesting day, when the new councils go live and the old ones cease to exist. At the moment, we're kind of, can you see my cursor? Can you see my cursor? Everyone? Perfect. Okay. So at the moment, we're in this bit here. So between February and March 26. This is where we're currently in the statutory consultation stage. So government are currently asking residents, businesses, wider organisations what they think of the business cases that I've just run through in terms of the maps. We're currently, in terms of local work, in this pre-planning activity. So right now, until we get the ministerial decision, likely in July, we're having to focus on the preparatory work. So what that means is the work that will not change regardless of the government's decision. So, for example, looking at contracts, looking at HR terms and conditions, looking at assets, things that we know we're going to have to do regardless of whether the government picks 1, 3, 4 or 5 unitaries. What we're not doing at the moment is getting into service redesign or transformation, because we can't do that until we know the minister's decision, which we're promised will be before summer recess on the 16th of July. My hunch is it will be kind of the 15th of July at 23:59 when they switch off the lights, but let's see. So once we have the decision, obviously, then the proper transformation work will start in terms of implementation. And that will be focusing on work initially between July 26 and May 27, because May 27 is when we're expecting the shadow unitary elections. So there will be elections to elect the new councillors for the shadow unitary or unitaries. Essentially, it's at that point the new councillors will come into being, albeit in shadow form. In between then, we're anticipating the legislation, so the structural change order, as it's called, to be laid in around September, October 26, which will set out the legislative framework for us making these changes. So at this point is when we start seeing service-specific work starting. I think that's the important thing for VCSE colleagues to be cognizant of. It's at that point we'll start having conversations around what the new unitaries look like, what, for example, social services or housing or public health might look like in those new unitaries. Once we have the shadow unitary elections in May 27, you might think that 14 councils is enough. For a short period of time, we're going to have even more, because we're going to have the shadow unitaries and the existing councils in existence together for 11 months. And that will be to facilitate the transition of what we call safe and legal services from the existing councils to the new councils. And they will need to appoint a few statutory officers like a chief executive, a chief finance officer and a monitoring officer. But existing services will still be the responsibility of the existing councils to deliver until vesting day, so the 1st of April 2028. And it's at that point that the baton is literally handed over. So the 30th of March, it's very much still the existing councils. 1st of April, the new councils take over, and the existing councils then go into close down. And it's at that point the new councils will take over responsibility. Realistically, most staff will probably be 2P'd over between the existing councils and new councils. So a lot of the transformation activity will actually begin post vesting day. The focus before then will be on what we call safe and legal. So that's the kind of situation we are in terms of the timeline at the moment. So I guess the important thing to take from that is once we have the ministerial decision and once that planning and implementation activity begins, it's at that point that the VCSE colleagues will be particularly important to engaging with some of those work streams that will be progressing on implementation. And I think it's important to say at this point that the chief executives are very clear, and the leaders, that the new council or councils absolutely need a strong VCSE sector from that point. So very important that you're involved. My final slide is on the consultation, which I mentioned, which is currently live. It was launched on the 5th of February. The link obviously is in the slides when I send it around, so you'll be able to click on the link or just Google it. So it closes at 11:59 on the 26th of March. Any individual or organisation or groups of organisations can respond. It's fair to say government and us are learning from other areas that are kind of slightly ahead of us in the process, like Surrey. You can view all of the options, as I said, on the Kent Leaders website, and there's the link there for you there as well. Paper and email responses are also accepted for those that might not have the ability to, particularly service users who might have the ability to use online services. And there's details on how to access that in our libraries and civic centres as well. And as I said, a government decision by the summer, whatever that means, hopefully by July the 16th. So that's kind of where we are, Steve. Before I hand over for questions, Lydia, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so, Tim. That was very comprehensive. I'd probably chip into discussion if that makes sense. I can see Beth's got her hand up. So
yeah. Before we do that, just to say that what we've done already as a steering group, just to remind you, is that I went along to the Joint Kent Chiefs meeting last month with Ethna, who is the chair of the Medway VCSE Leaders Group. And we made the offer there of helping to be a coordination point for the sector, working with the Kent Joint Chiefs and the work streams that are going to come out of this, and help to kind of be a sort of organisation point and a sharing information point. And it would seem that we could mirror the kind of arrangements that we had for the instigation of the Integrated Care Board in the NHS, where we helped to identify representation to go on those groups, and remuneration as well, so that it was available to organisations, smaller organisations, as well as the larger ones. So kind of that was an offer that we made, so kind of feels like we've already got a good relationship. And what we want to do is we're going to use your presentation just there and the video of you presenting it, if hopefully that's okay, Tim, to share amongst the sector, so we can start kind of being that, helping to inform the sector and keep them up to date. And once we've had the decision in July, look at some kind of awareness raising event, engaging with the sector, starting to get their views once we're clear about kind of what the way forward is. So kind of that's what we've talked about and what we've got in mind. It's one of our priorities for the next year or two. So yeah, just to say that. So thank you ever so much, Tim. That was really helpful. Beth.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. The question I have, lots of our sector, we're doing the best we can. We're not a lot of money, and lots of us quite small, it is. What would your recommendation be for our sorts of organisations to be doing? Because we advocate, there's lots of small organisations who want to hear about it. If you were in their position, where would you think they should use their energy? Because energy is limited and we're all there. What do you think? Because there's lots of suggestions here, and I'm just thinking about the smaller groups really, and making sure they get their say. But actually, sometimes the say is about either turning up and making your organisation work or doing something else. That's the life people live. What would you say? What would you recommend for those sort of organisations?
Really good question. So in terms of making sure
can we write that down just for my year contribution? Really good question. That'll do me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So in terms of ensuring those organisations' voices are heard in the process, is that what you meant, Beth, or in terms of service delivery?
Yeah, just what would they, because they're small, do you know what I mean? Lots of these are small, run by small people. What do you think would be their most effective use of their energy, really? Because life's busy. What would you recommend?
So I think first and foremost, the value of a group like this that represents the sector as a whole is massive, because, as you say, you have some very big VCSE organisations and some very small ones, and it's important that all the voices are heard through as kind of strategic and as streamlined process as possible. I think to some extent it depends on the sector and the services that you're providing, but I think first of all, being aware of the changes that are happening, working with this group to understand the implications and make your voice heard. Obviously, the consultation I mentioned is still open for another week or so, and whilst there is a kind of pro forma of questions, there's also an email address if you have strong views on a particular outcome or a particular geography. But I think overall, the most important thing is we've still got to deliver BAU for the next 2 years. So we can't just be focusing on what 2028 and 2029 looks like. So focusing on doing what you're currently doing is really important, but being aware of the changes and feeding into the changes that are proposed, so that hopefully once those new council or councils are created, you're in the best place to be able to work together in partnership to continue delivering and continue that strong relationship into the medium term.
Thank you.
Could I just add to that? I don't know whether Lydia might want to come in on this as well, because one of the things I did after initially speaking to Tim was approach some of the other areas that he's mentioned. So I've spoken with the VCSE in Cumbria, and I've shared the notes with you of that conversation. And one of the things they flagged really clearly was kind of where things potentially went awry with existing contracts and grants, especially grants. And one of the things that we were saying that people should think about right now is sort of making sure that kind of the grant they're getting is on the list for transferring across to kind of whatever the new structure is. And I know Lydia spoke with me about whether now is the right time and kind of how to approach that.
Yeah, I think it's difficult between now and July. You know, at the point where we know what the geographies are, and what those unitary councils look like, I think especially for smaller organisations who are at that more local level, that's quite important, because who is it that you would be talking to in the future is currently completely unknown. It also depends on what those grant arrangements are. You know, if they're only annual grant arrangements, there's a lot to work through in terms of what does transfer to a new unitary, or what, you know, it depends what the commitments are, as opposed to somebody's got a 10-year contract to deliver a service. It's a very different matter. I think we've got to work through that, and I think at the moment we're probably not there yet. So I think with this, as Tim's outlined, you know, there's a long time and a long way to go between now and even the summer, it feels like, but definitely to 2028. And I think we're going to have to take it stage by stage, phase by phase. And that's why this group is crucial in terms of keeping that engagement going, because we are working our way through it. We don't really have a model where we can just take it off the shelf and go, well, this is how it's going to work in a county this size. So I think we just got to keep the engagement channels open, and your role, you know, as far as you can in sharing messages out, so that those smaller groups who don't have access or time to engage with councils, I think is crucial. So I think the key to this is probably keeping communication going as we go.
Right, thanks, Lydia. Jane.
Yes, first of all, can I say I'm one of the camp that I think this is quite a good idea, actually. It just seems like it's all much more sensible than the existing arrangement, although I'm sure that's a rather simplistic way of looking at it, but that's just the way it feels to me at the moment. Just a couple of questions. First of all, this might seem like a strange question, but will it definitely happen? Is there any reason why this won't happen now?
Should I take that one first?
No.
I think $1 million question, Jane. So we've been here multiple times before. Lydia and I are both a bit older than we look, or we're definitely older than Lydia looks. Maybe you might disagree with me. But we have been here several times before, and it hasn't materialised. This has felt tangibly different. The government feel absolutely determined to go ahead with the process. There have been opportunities for them to change their mind, you know, for example, changes of Secretary of State and Minister, spending reviews, and at each time they've doubled down in terms of their focus on delivering this. We've now reached statutory consultation, you know, which is pretty far ahead in the process, and they're already engaging on drafting the legislation. So never say never, you know. I mean, look at the events in the Middle East, and you know, it's a politically volatile time, of course. But I would put an 85% figure on it personally. I was at 90 before Christmas, so it's got to help us slightly, but essentially, I think it's highly likely that it will happen this time.
Second question from me, more to do with the specific actually about some of the proposed models. Swale is a bit of a carve up in a couple of those proposals, isn't it? I know when I was working in Medway, the logic from the Medway team was that they were going to use the M2 as a divider. And I'm assuming that extends through to the A2, hence the carve up in Swale as it runs through with a top and bottom part of Swale.
That is an excellent and very locally specific question. I believe so. Looking at the map, it looks to me like it's around the A2, M2 kind of border. Certainly, It may not be exactly on the road, but it certainly goes along kind of the villages and towns along that route. So I think that's right. I presume we're talking about 4D. So in that scenario, I think that's right. Interestingly, I'm that sad that I read a paper from 1966 on local government reorganisation before Christmas that equally struggled with whether Faversham should go into East Kent with Canterbury or with Sittingbourne into Swale, or in the same way as Swanley in West Kent is often debated in the same way. So clearly these debates carry on for decades and probably carry on for decades more. So, but I think what's important to note is that Medway, in drawing up this option, would have been clear to ensure that individual settlements weren't split, so that the villages and towns along that route will be in a particular either east, mid or north.
Thank you. Yes, Faversham's never been very happy with being part as well, as it's always wanted to be part of Canterbury, so that's not unusual. Last but not least, education, schools, will they also be falling into these new structures, or will it be across Kent?
Good question. I mean, ultimately, I've said good question a lot, haven't I? Because there have been good questions. I think, I mean, what we called the LEA function as was, so the old local authority education function, doesn't really exist in the same way as it used to anyway. So obviously, most schools are part of academy trusts now, or clusters of academies, and obviously they won't be affected. Individual education functions, particularly around things like special educational needs, will be the responsibility of the new unitaries, however. So there won't be a county-wide education function. It will be the sovereign responsibility of the new unitaries, unless, of course, the new unitaries, assuming there's more than one, unless the new unitaries decide to enter into a shared service arrangement. But the statutory responsibility will be with the new unitaries.
Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Stephen,
Jane. Lydia, yeah.
So yeah, I just put my sorry, Beck, I know you were coming in. I just put my hand up on that particular point about education. We are also alongside this doing quite a lot of work looking at the new education white paper and send consultation proposals, because obviously some of the duties that places now onto local authorities shifts our role in education in some cases, you know, quite substantially. So and that white paper goes along the exact timescales of LGR. So the new responsibilities would be day one for unitaries. So which is, I don't know if that's helpful or not, or thought through or not, but you know, the timescales are mapped. So we do need to look at that as well.
Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we let Tim go? So that's just to say thank you, Tim. You've been very generous with your time before this meeting with myself and Ethna, and so it'd be good to kind of keep those conversations going and see how much we can do in the time we've got before there's a decision, and then what we need to do once the decision's made. So we're going to have a bit of a chat today about kind of what do we want to prioritise going forward, what do we want sort of next steps we think should be. So kind of we'll catch up with you after that and have more of a discussion. But that was really helpful. Thank you. Really clear.
No, absolutely.
Just one more from me. Did we ask whether we could have a copy of this these slides, please? Is that okay? Yes,
absolutely fine. Yeah,
okay,
I'll share them with Steve and Hannah to circulate. Absolutely. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Really good to meet you all, and absolutely we'll keep the conversation going.